We're going to move on to our second keynote presenter this morning, Miss Charlotte Taylor. Charlotte is a passionate member of the UK's National Union of Students team. Charlotte's principal role is to utilise the expertise NUS has developed running sustainability programs on campus to expand and develop opportunities for students off campus and abroad. Charlotte also leads on NUS's work in developing green skills and training. She also chairs the Greener Jobs Alliance, a coalition of trade unions, international green charities and UK national environmental groups, and has developed schemes for increasing student involvement in sustainability. All the way from UK, and to continue our UK feel, please welcome Charlotte to the stage.
Thanks, Leanne. I firstly just want to say thank you so much for the weather. I've had a brilliant time. It's been the hottest summer on record in England this year, and it still doesn't even come close to the kind of weather that we're experiencing here. The second thing I want to say is I come from a family of chemists, and I have never found chemistry so cool and inspiring, so thank you so much for such a great keynote. That's brilliant. So I'm here today basically to talk to you a little bit about the student movement in the UK and how students are becoming more and more at the heart of the environmental sector and pushing forward the agenda environmentally in the UK. I want to give you a little bit of a background on NUS because I know there are some differences between both of our NUSs, so I want to give you a bit of a background on our NUS and a little bit about why our sustainability team has kind of grown over the last 10 years and then go on to sort of talk about our vision and where we want the student movement to go in terms of their environmental behaviours and what they're pushing in tertiary education. So I'll start off with the NUS background. NUS is 91 years old this year. We celebrated our 90th birthday last year. We are different to the Australian NUS in that every student in the UK is automatically a member of their student union, and then their student unions affiliate to NUS. So we have 600 member unions across the UK, and we represent 7 million students in England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. So we really are the sort of national voice of students. We're led democratically by students, which is sometimes incredibly frustrating, but most of the time incredibly inspiring. Our current president, Tony Pearce, she's our first woman president for 5 years, and she's also our first president that hasn't come with a degree to student politics. She's come through further education, which I find extremely inspiring to have somebody like that to sort of lead as a woman and lead from something that's just such a different background to many of our student leaders. So we are led democratically by them, and they campaign nationally with our support on issues affecting students throughout the UK and throughout the world as well. We also lead research on educational policy, anything to do with the kind of tertiary education sector, and anything to do with kind of student welfare. And we also push for educational change. So we work with government, we work with individual universities, we work with student unions on making sure that the student experience, whether it's curricular or extracurricular, is really worth its weight in gold. So that's kind of NUS. We were set up in 1922. Came out of the First World War. So a man called Iverson Macadam, who was the current King's College London president, decided that nothing so horrific, there should never be that kind of breakdown in international barriers again. Nothing so horrific should ever happen, and he decided to set up this National Union of Students where students throughout the UK built up this rapport with students throughout the world. So we really do come from an international background. And through our 90th birthday celebrations last year, we've really started to look at that international focus again and how we can take our work out internationally, and also to experience other international students and try and make sure that we're doing something that's global and not just focusing on the UK. So our 2013 vision of NUS is that we are a pioneering, innovative and powerful campaigning organisation. We're also the national voice for students in the UK. We represent 7 million students. So if anybody wants to know what students are thinking in the UK, they tend to come to us. And yes, we're very keen to sort of strengthen our international ties. NUS is split into 3 strands, just to give you a bit of an idea of what exactly we do. So we have NUS Group is our kind of umbrella organisation, and then we're split into NUS UK, which is our political strategy unit. It supports our officers, our student leaders, in their sort of political strategy and completing their manifestos. That's the more political side. We look at policy and welfare through that. We then have NUS Services, which is based in the lovely sunny town of Macclesfield, just south of Manchester. I lied when I said it was sunny. They deal mainly with our sort of commercial side of things, so customer services, finance, but they also hold our purchasing consortium, which is actually where our environment and ethical department started. So our purchasing consortium was set up in the 80s, and it's a bit like the tertiary access group in the way it works. So we buy, we make contracts with sellers like Coca-Cola, Coors, for clothing, food and drink, and stationery, and then student unions are able to sell it at a lower price to students. So that's kind of where we started from, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second. And then the Environment and Ethics Department now are based in NUS Charity, which deals with strengthening student unions, and it's the much less political side of things. So we look at sort of quality, enhancing the experience, the opportunities for students, and volunteering, basically. So to sum up, NUS, we fight barriers to education in the UK, but we also fight barriers to education across the world, depending on what our student leaders are asking us to do. We empower students to shape their quality learning experiences, so they are really at the heart of the education system for us. And we also support influential, democratic and well-resourced student unions. So sustainability at NUS comes from humble beginnings. Our first ever environmental sort of role was set up in the purchasing consortium, and their role was to be the ethical supply chain coordinator. So they were to make deals with the contracts that we were making with people like Coca-Cola and Coors, and making sure that their practices are ethical when selling their bottled Coca-Cola or beer within the UK. 10 years down the line, we take up 10% of the organisation now, the staff in the sustainability department. So there's 25 members of staff and 250 members of staff in the organisation. So we've grown hugely, and the work that we do supports now 2 main sort of visions. This is where we see tertiary education kind of heading in terms of sustainability in the UK. So firstly, for student unions, we want them to be green hubs for sustainability. So we want them to be looking internally at themselves, greening themselves and looking at their own processes and their own ethics. We then want them to take their students and themselves out into their institutions and support them in greening initiatives. And then we want our student unions and our institutions to go out into their local communities to work with schools, prisons, hospitals on doing the same thing, just making sort of community hubs for sustainability, with students really leading the way on that. And I'll talk a little bit about how that's kind of working at the moment. It's really exciting to see. The other kind of twofold, the other part of our twofold vision is the more of students as individuals. So through their curricula, through their extracurricular work, and through the way that campus projects sustainability, we want students to be leaving university as part of the solution to environmental problems and not part of the problem. So our vision and strategy. You can see here that we are led by students, so you'll see, thankfully, that we have an extremely broad mission and strategy. This will keep us going for years to come, I think. They don't even hone it down to within the UK, so they really do have a global perspective, which is both inspiring and also terrifying when you read what we have to do on a daily basis. So we're looking to green suppliers and student unions and help unions to green themselves, their institutions and their communities, as I said. And our 3 to 5 year vision is that in 5 years' time, we'd like unions to be delivering central environmental projects, and I'll talk to you a little bit about how we've started to do that. So while NUS have quite a lot of projects that unions can run at the moment, we want them to be really taking responsibility themselves and making projects that are really applicable to that local area. It's really inspiring to see what they're already starting to do, and we're just introducing step changes all the time. And the way we fulfill this strategy is through these kind of 5 pillars 5 strategic pillars. So installing green behaviours, whether that's within the student body in an institution, within the staff body, so we're projecting that sort of campus ideal of sustainability and making it a social norm almost on campus. We're creating community bridges, so students in the UK see universities as moral leaders at the heart of their community, and so we really want to put that into practice and get students out into their community and really supporting organisations that are around them. We want to be increasing employability and widening participation, and I don't know if this, well, I'm sure it's a similar problem here and across the world that our students are now demanding. Yes, we would like an amazing degree and a really interesting time at university, but we also want to be guaranteed that because we're paying all of this money, we want to be guaranteed a job at the end of it. So increasing employability and giving them skills to go out into their communities and into their careers and make a real difference. Making student unions stronger. And that's just part of the NUS strategy altogether. And then greening our supply chain, so that's very sort of separate. So from humble beginnings of our ethical supply chain coordinator, he was then approached by student unions saying, look, we're demanding all this stuff from Coca-Cola, from all of these big businesses, saying, you know, we want you to be doing this, this, and this to be more green. But actually, we don't know how to green ourselves back at home. We don't know what we're supposed to be doing. So we started off by creating a workbook for student unions. It's a competition. It's a very thought-through competition. They have a workbook that has bronze, silver, and gold criteria, and unions every year compete to become the best, the greenest union in the country. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about what's come out of that in a second. So we started off by doing that. And then we were inspired by this process and thought, actually, you know what, we can use this. We can use the same model within our institutions. So we started moving into our institutions and started firstly looking at staff behaviours within universities, but also within the processes as well. Once this had happened, we realised that we had quite a flexible model and we were able to take them out into the communities. That's kind of how it started growing. We then realised that we needed some research in order to kind of make our demands, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about that in a second. But we started researching. We've just begun some work on greener curriculum, work with academics in the UK, and we have just received a piece of big funding from our government, which I'll talk to you about as we go along. All of these things come together as building blocks for greener students. The front guy on this picture, unbelievably, is a member of staff at NUS. And occasionally at big events, he does bring out the costume. It's true. So greener student unions, and you can see up here there's a workbook with bronze, silver, and gold tabs. So for student unions, we start them off, and they have these bronze criteria, looking at their internal processes, looking at the way they treat their staff, looking at their energy management, looking at their water use, looking at how they use cleaning products, looking at their community volunteering hours. We've seen a huge increase in community volunteering hours in the last sort of 6 years since we've been running the programme. So unions fight for this competition. I'll tell you that Liverpool Student Union won as top union this year, and it was almost a fist fight towards the end. So we have, regular support from NUS, and people take it extremely seriously. They're audited at the end of the process by NUS officers, and it's a really good way for us to get out and just get inspired by what the students are really doing out there. You know, we've got 105 student unions that are signed up to this programme. And you don't really see them unless you actually go and experience what they're doing. So we've seen huge wins over the last few years on union sort of ventilation systems. We've saved thousands of pounds, or they've saved thousands of pounds and tons of CO2 just on making, simple steps, simple broken down steps. I think the bronze criteria section is only about 25 criteria long, but they're just broken down steps for unions to just work their way through to become greener. So you can see how it's grown over the last few years. So we've now got, it's actually 105 student unions signed up. And last year we had 7,000 actions taken, and 3,000 of those were as a result of green impact. And the other criteria were being done already. So that's a really great way for us to celebrate what student unions are already doing. 32 of them were awarded gold last year. So we're going to have to just keep making it harder for them. So this workbook idea, Green Impact, we felt like it really worked, and we were approached by a sustainability director at the University of Bristol in 2008. Now, I think quite a lot of the people in this room will kind of see where he was coming from when he took on this role. On his desk was the responsibility of the carbon footprint of everybody in the university, staff and students and buildings. Bristol University is spread out across a whole city, and he just sat there and was like, I can't do this alone. I don't know, I can't do this alone. I've got a very small team. It's nowhere near big enough to engage with everybody. What am I going to do? So we created a workbook exactly the same as the Student Union workbook, but specific to Bristol University. So it looked at all of their already in place environmental initiatives. And we got departments at the university to sign up and go in competition with each other. So maths versus chemistry, finance versus procurement. So all of that old rivalry came up in the competition, which was great. But it also was really useful for him. You know, he had about 50 sort of very keen academics and support staff that were quite key, quite sort of environmental anyway. So he'd get these emails all the time being like, which bin do I put this in? And why haven't you sorted this out? And well, there's a plumbing problem in my corridor. And he'd get all of these emails. Well, the Green Impact Workbook kind of faced all of those problems. All of the answers were there. So he could just say, just go to the Green Impact Workbook and look, and all of your answers are there. So it was really, really useful for them. And we rolled it out to, we now run it in 60 universities across the UK. And we realised that, okay, we run it in Oxford University and we run it in the University of East London. So these universities are so different. The criteria are very different. The way that they treat their staff is very different. The way their academics work is very different. Their students are very different. So why not just work it for other organisations? Why not take that same model out into other organisations? I should just say quickly that we also, students are trained to support the teams. So a maths department will have sort of 3 or 4 students that are trained to go in and support the teams, and they get really great experience. And students also audit each of the departments, and you will never believe the glee until you see it of a student going into a vice-chancellor's corridor and saying, actually, it's not quite a silver award this year, sir. So as with the student unions, we have an awards ceremony at the end of the year, and it's a really great opportunity for us with the Vice-Chancellor of the university and some senior academics to celebrate the little things that people are doing. People that get involved, yes, often they're very keen green people. Often they're people at the very start of their career. I worked with a girl who started off actually as a receptionist on a university, and she took this on and she was like, you know what, I really want some project management experience. I don't want to be in this job forever. I've just left university, and she rolled with it. She got gold in 1 year. It was very impressive. She also won the Environmental Hero competition for that university, and the Vice-Chancellor recognised her. And the next time I went back to that university, she was no longer in reception. She was working in a department that she wanted to be working in, doing research. And so it's a really great way to get people noticed. It's also a really good social opportunity to get people together in teams, which I think there should be more of in universities. Ooh. So, on the subject of kind of greener institutions, we also run a program called Student Switch Off. It's an inter-halls energy competition for students that are just in their first year of university or just moved into halls of residence. Now, in the UK, students don't have to pay for their energy or their electricity or heating in their halls of residence. So we're faced with a bit of a difficult problem in getting them to kind of install behaviours and attitudes for the rest of their lives. We work to a theory in most of our programs called the habit discontinuity theory. I don't know if anybody knows it. Blank faces, it's fine. So it's something I think that was set up by the UK government. It was researched by the UK government, and it basically says that when a person goes through a period of extreme change in their life, they either pick up or drop habits that stay with them for the rest of their lives, which is why our NHS target anti-smoking campaigns at pregnant women and that kind of thing. So we're looking at the same theory. We're saying these students are leaving home, they're learning to sort of shop and live themselves. If we can install behaviours and attitudes at the very start of their university career, this kind of thing will stay with them for life. So what we want is all students to to be turning lights off, and we're not going to make a sustainability eco Power Ranger out of every single one of them, but there is an opportunity for them to step up and start coming to workshops and doing communication skills. But fundamentally, if you save energy in your halls, which we monitor, you win a Ben & Jerry's party. If you upload pictures to Facebook showing yourself doing something fabulous, like putting loads of clothes on instead of sticking the heating on, turning your lights off, then you win prizes. You win a local haircut, you win club tickets to your local bar, that kind of thing. So it's basically save energy, win prizes. It's a really great way to get students to kind of start changing their behaviours at university. Oh, the picture's gone. I'm so sorry. was such a nice picture. So we also run a program called Student Eats, which is run through 25 student unions, and again, it's looking at greener institutions, and it's a biodiversity and local food growing project, and unions will set up their own local food growing projects with support from NUS, and we have everything from cooperatives to students kind of selling the produce that they're growing in local market stalls through sort of through local farmers market relations. That's a really great way for them to get out in the community. And then we have allotments that academics work on. So at Exeter University, they have bees there, and academics take their students and study the psychology of the bees in the university, which is a really great way for us to kind of start embedding what we're doing in the curriculum. And then also on the sort of greener institution, under that sort of category, I've got a really interesting quote here, which is almost the inspiration for why we find this so important. So it's David Orr in 1994. He said, "It's worth noting that the destruction of the planet is not the work of ignorant people. Rather, it's largely the results of the work by people with BAs, BScs, LLBs, MBAs, and PhDs. Education can equip people to be more effective vandals of the earth. If one listens carefully, it may even be possible to hear the creation groan every year in late May when another batch of smart, degree-holding but ecologically illiterate Homo sapiens who are eager to succeed are launched into the biosphere." Bit harsh. But you can kind of see where he's coming from, and then there's a movement in the UK of academics. You'll have heard of Daniela Tilbury and Simon Kemp and Stephen Sterling, and they do fantastic work on sort of pushing forward this agenda. And NUS really has had to step up as the student voice of this. You know, we want our course reps every year to be saying to their maths department, you know what? This is something that's going on in the UK at the moment. We want to get this out of our time at university. We want to be learning these things. We want these skills. We need our students to be doing that. We need our academic officers at student unions to be demanding this on university boards and saying, why isn't this happening? Why aren't our students leaving university with the knowledge and skills for a changing economy? You're kind of screwing us over at the moment. We don't know where we're going with this. So it's a really good way for us to kind of step up and really support Daniela and Stephen and the rest of those academics and give a student voice to it as well. So I was talking about green impact earlier, and I wanted to sort of show you how we sort of do institutional change, and then what we do within the communities as well. So green impact, we realised, worked for loads of different institutions, and so why shouldn't it work? Oh, it's happened again. I'm so sorry. Why shouldn't it work for local community organisations? So we tried it out in a hospital. We took students into the hospital. They project managed clinical research teams, finance departments, just like universities, paediatric wards. They project managed them through a green impact workbook. Very simple steps. It's small behaviour change, and we've seen some amazing things come out of it. So the kind of ideas for behaviour change that have come out of it. One student said to a paediatric ward, well, you're finding it difficult to get parents to turn lights off in bathrooms at the moment. Well, obviously they're going through quite a stressful time in their lives, but if you stick up posters on the door that says leaving this light on, turning this light off overnight will save this much energy, which will power an incubator or power this medical system for this long, that's a really great thing. And so these are students that are coming up with these ideas for behaviour change, and it's so fantastic that they can go into their community and advise their hospital on their sustainability programmes. So we now run green impact in local government, hospitals, police forces, the fire service, throughout the private sector and some private sector organisations, large charities, sports clubs, international universities. We've had our first international university sign up to Green Impact, and that's really exciting to see their student association get so excited that they're going to be helping their university to sort of change behaviours and make sustainability a social norm there. And more. And I just wanted to talk to you quickly a little about the fire service that we work with. So Manchester College Students' Union, they have quite a rough demographic, quite notorious in Manchester, and their public services department have been trying to get them to local police stations. The police stations were like, well, these kids are from which estate? No, I'm sorry, I don't know if that's appropriate. I don't know if we can trust them here. And they take them to sort of the local council, and they'd say, well, they can look at this building, but we don't want them talking to our staff, just in case, they're kids. They're 16-year-old kids, and they're desperate to learn. And so we trained them to environmentally audit fire stations that had been running Green Impact, and we minibused them around Manchester, and they all got off, and they got to chat to these fire people that were telling them, this is what we do in our, this is what we do in our spare time. This is what we do when we're waiting for the call. This is what it could be like if you went into the same career. But at the same time, these students were environmentally auditing them. So whatever career they go into, they'll have that from that time in their lives. They'll have that environmental knowledge and that awareness, so that when they go into their future careers, they'll be like, oh, hang on, I remember this fire station was doing something really brilliant. Why don't I just kind of apply that to my work? And hopefully it will stop becoming a sort of thought process, and it will just become natural and subconscious. It's great. You see why I love my job. So greener funding, and I don't know, I know some people in the room know about this, but we, in May, after quite a lot of work with our government over the last sort of 6 months or so, we were able to announce an amazing £5.2 million for ambitious student-led sustainability projects in student unions. The government gave us this pot of money, and we were able to kind of create a formative bidding process for student unions. So what we said to them was, like, give us your ideas, and then you have 6 weeks to kind of build these ideas with the support of a member of staff, so that every bid that we look at is a good bid. And that's something that we've kind of faced in the past, and I've faced working in universities as well. As I write this bid, I spend 4 weeks on it, and then I hear nothing for 6 months, and then I presume that I didn't get the funding. So it was a really great way for us to kind of train student unions on writing bids for funding as well. We were able to announce 25 student unions to have between £100,000 and £300,000 worth of funding to run sustainability projects in their local institutions over 2 years with support of NUS. They focus on sort of partnership and impact, and that definitely involves the institution. So every bid that we looked at, if it was going to be a winning bid, it had to have the institution's involvement. It also had to have the local community's involvement. So we had MPs signing letters of approval and things like that. So there were community links. There was a big focus on the legacy of what they should be doing, and we had 122 bids come in for 25 student unions. We had £22 million worth of bidding, which is such a great thing to say back to our UK government. Okay, thanks for the £5.2 million, guys, but actually we need to kind of times that by 5. There's so many great ideas out there, and they're really making huge change. So if you could think about that for next year, that would be great. So it's a really exciting situation to be in, and you can see now that it's starting to sort of look at our vision where, yes, student unions are using our projects, and we are starting to create a social norm for sustainability on campus, and we're starting to create these student unions as green hubs, but they're also introducing their own step change and saying, you know what, this is our responsibility as well. We should do this. It shouldn't just be NUS that are helping us do this. And our bids have been everything from a further education college have decided to set up a student union. So they didn't have a student union before. They set up a student union with sustainability at the heart of what they do and greening the curriculum at the heart of what they do. And so the sustainability department are the most important university department to that student union. And imagine that, setting up a student union with all of that, with that at the centre of it. So we've got things like that. We've got huge unions doing things on greening the curriculum, and local community projects, setting up social enterprises and getting students out there and doing something amazing in their community. So the combination of this, of NUS-led and student union-led and student-led themselves, sustainability projects has massively developed the sector. And I kind of wanted to conclude on 2 points. My first one is that I was really sort of touched by what Leanne and Ian sort of touched on yesterday. I arrived in Australia the morning of your election results, and my uncle picked me up from the airport. Yeah, my uncle picked me up from the airport, and he was swerving around, and he was shouting, and, you know, this is what's gone wrong in the past, and all this kind of thing. And it made me think, yesterday. In 2010, in the UK, 2 parties were elected into coalition by government. One of the parties, the largest party, had promised the greenest government ever. The other party had promised that they wouldn't increase student fees at all. So within 5 days of them being elected into government, our dear Prime Minister appointed a climate change skeptic to our Environment Minister position. So that wasn't so great. And the day later, they announced a increase in fees from £3,000 to £9,000 per year, which is absolutely unbelievable, and it takes us back about 15 years in terms of education. So we were in such a sticky position, and I just wanted to say, over the last 3 years, what we've seen is people say, you know what, it's been so much in the press about our government doing nothing to help students and nothing to help the environment. I don't really know much about the environment, but I think it's probably time for me to just step up and do something in my local community. And I think that's what you saw within sort of 3 days of your government being elected. Your climate commission sort of dissolved, and then your community stepped up and was like, you know what, this isn't how it's going to happen. So I just wanted to say, sort of 3 years in, we have seen so much grassroots environmental projects, and it's almost like, well, okay, you're not going to do it, and that's really bad, but we're probably better at it anyway. So, you know. And the other thing I wanted to say is that everyone has bad days when they're working with students, and I can tell you that for free. We have a time of year where most of us get up at 5 a.m. every morning for a train. We train students, and sometimes they're a bit snotty and a bit rude. And, you know, you have sort of bad days with students, and I think that's what the beauty is of working with them. Our students are often obstinate, often a bit disinterested, often sort of quite unimpressed with what you're doing, and always late. But at the same time, speaking to them, they're so inspirational, they're powerful, they're very creative, they can be interested when you start speaking to them, and they are the most inspirational bunch of people that you could possibly be working with. Not only that, they are our future, so they are going to be our future leaders. They're going to be our future global leaders. They're going to be the future of our governments. They're going to be the future business leaders. People coming out of university and college must make up the majority of leaders within the world. And so if we don't make the differences now, both in their behaviours and attitudes and in their curricula, where are we going to be in hundreds of years' time? So I just want to say, keep going. I know how you feel, but they're amazing. And yeah, thanks for having me.